All right, hey Vikings fans, welcome into another episode of the Skol Hop. I'm Evan.
And I'm Austin.
We're just a couple of dudes from Iowa. We like drinking beer, talking about the Vikings.
Yep, and if you're watching and not just listening, you can see we're graced with Forrest's presence yet again. Friend of the show, Forrest. Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, I appreciate it.
And
yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It's brew day.
Yeah.
On location. A lot of good stuff going to happen.
Yep, that's the main reason you're here. We also kind of like spending time with you, but also Evan and I don't know what we're doing when it comes to brewing beer. So we definitely need you.
You guys know enough. We did this last year.
I think you're overestimating our knowledge. I'm not driving the car on this one, so I'm not trying to remember every step.
You're right. You're the navigator.
No, I'm the like backseat person that says, "Hey, should we be turning here?" I don't know. We just
like it. I like it.
We're here. We're brewing beer. It's the second, not the second edition, but like the second
annual brew day.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Skol Hop.
Yes.
And we're also you can't brew beer without drinking beer. So today we're going to be sipping on some Big Grove Moon Rabbit. It's a Japanese style lager, so I'm excited to crack these open, and yeah, it'll be fun to hang out in the garage for a little bit, drink some beer, and make some beer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have time to, I wouldn't say kill, but we got all the beer in the mash tun right now, and it just has to kind of soak on those grains for quite a while. So
Yep. So go ahead and grab a cold one. Join us.
Skol.
Skol. All right, so we just want to say thank you to show sponsor Big Top Ventures for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to take an all-inclusive trip to Mexico or Jamaica, go ahead and reach out to Big Top Ventures, and they will get you hooked up with the best price possible. How can they reach out to Big Top Ventures there, Ev?
Yeah, you should send them an email, bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. We'll put that down here somewhere.
Probably right over my face.
Or maybe up above. I don't know. Obviously, we're in a different spot today, but we'll figure out a way to flash their email up there so that you can type that in and send them an email.
Yeah, we've already got their logo on the screen here. Forrest is repping the Big Top hat. But yeah, go ahead and reach out to them. They'll get you hooked up with the best price possible.
Yeah.
Thanks, Big Top Ventures.
So we mentioned this in the opener here, but we've got this Big Grove, what's it called? Moon Rabbit. Moon Rabbit. Almost said White Rabbit.
Well, there's a White Rabbit on the can.
There is a White Rabbit, which is why I was going to say that. Moon Rabbit, it's a Japanese-style rice lager. You want to tell us a little bit more about the beer?
It's from Big Grove. Basically, a lager is nice, crisp, clean. So I think it's only like 4.5%. So easy, crushable, drinkable. But has a nice flavor profile. The rice really soaks up, and gives that a different flavor than just regular barley grain. So not to say that they didn't use any barley. Obviously, they did, but it's definitely very tasty.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure I have at some point, but I can't think of a time where I've had this Japanese style lager, and yeah, it's got really good flavor for a lager. It's nice.
Yeah.
Easy drinking.
It kind of makes me want to go back to Japan and try like a legit not that this isn't legit because it's a good beer, but I've been to Japan. I went when I was, I think, like 20. And I wasn't drinking at that point, so I didn't partake in anything while I was there. But yeah, it makes me want to go back. It makes me want to try to find some authentic Japanese beer.
I'd say over the last year, I've seen definitely the lager game move their way onto the shelves a lot more.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see more, not just from Big Grove, from other breweries as well.
Yeah. And of course you brought the beer today, so thank you for bringing it. This is really good. Good job, Big Grove.
Yeah. Excellent.
I do have a question for you. Where did you find this? Because I don't think I've seen this on the shelves at our local.
It was at the Devil's Glen Hy-Vee.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we're just not looking hard enough.
Maybe
they just put it on the shelf. It was interesting. It's not in. It was actually in a box, so I don't know if Big Grove's changed their packaging. So it wasn't just in the plastic can holders.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why you didn't see it. So
interesting. I feel like I was there yesterday, I think, And I was just kind of looking at the shelf, like, we've had that one, we've had that one, we've had that one, we've had that one, and we're starting to run out of Iowa beers.
Yeah, I will say that Devil's Glen Hy-Vee, I feel like they're starting to sprinkle in some new stuff, and maybe that's just breweries making some different stuff too. I know No Coast said that they're going to introduce a handful of new beers in 2025. Obviously, Big Grove. I don't know how long they've been making the Moon Rabbit, but this is the first time I've ever seen it.
Yeah, I think it's fairly new.
Yeah.
At least I've never had it before. So
yeah, I like it. I like breweries out there. Good job trying new things and keeping up with the things that are successful. But yeah, we like new stuff too.
Well, I would also add on to that. I mean, during the winter months, especially January, February, people, don't drink as much. They're on the dry January. So even if you're on that wagon, at least pick up, a 6-pack and then drink it, in a month or so. Those breweries need support, during
yeah,
those
for sure.
those months. So
what's kind of a typical rotation like for a brewery, maybe even like Big Grove size, which is pretty big? Like, how often are they folding in new beers into their rotation?
I mean, it really depends on the brewery. It seems like Big Grove's always they have like their rotation. They have their year rounds and they have their rotation seasonal. So you, like, every once in a while you'll see the Big Ed, you'll see the Turtle Hunter, stuff like that. And then every once in a while they'll throw in something brand new on the market. So they obviously have the capacity to do it. I mean, they have 4 locations now, so they can probably be a little more choosy on what they do, where other brewers, they have to be very careful, because if you make a beer, it's holding up one of your tanks for at least a few weeks long. So you just have to know what you're doing. So
Well, speaking of tanks, we've got a tank over here. We've got a few tanks, actually. We're making some beer right now. That's why we're in Austin's garage. This is the second annual brew day for the Skol Hop. And we talked a little bit about this on episode 79. We kind of went back to last year and talked about the hoppy amber beer that we made, which turned out really good.
Oh, so fantastic.
And I think we're going to do some different things this year in terms of... we're not going to bottle it necessarily, right? Last year
that didn't work out so well.
We'd use those tablets to bottle a 6-pack of bottles.
I think bottling's good when that's your best case scenario. We're lucky we have a few kegs that we can put the beer into, and I think it just obviously you can drink it faster because it carbonates quicker than just doing the bottling. But
yeah. Well, anyways, this year we're brewing a nut brown ale. Right?
We are. It's a style that actually I've never brewed before. I've done variations of brown, but yeah, we're gonna kick up a notch and try something brand new. It resembles a lot of like an English style brown ale. So
yeah, that's what you were saying the other day. Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited from anywhere from some of the grains, hop profile, and the yeast itself are ones that are used more in England. So
I'm excited. I've been opening up to the darker, the ambers, the reds, and then I think on episode 79 we also had a brown ale from Great Revivalist, and I'm definitely opening up to that whole world, and I'm liking it a lot. So I'm excited for this one. And like I said the other day on our last episode, Forrest, I've never had a bad beer that you've made. So a Forrest Miller version of a nut brown ale. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I think it's going to, obviously we'll have to wait and see, but it's going to measure in hopefully around 6%, just like last year's beer. So definitely still easily drinkable, but you got to have a little potency to that. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
So we kind of tossed around this idea last time on episode 79 of, I think it kind of came up right at the end of the episode, of maybe letting our viewers out there contribute to naming this beer. So if you're out there and you've got any ideas for the Skol Hop, obviously we are a Vikings themed podcast. We love talking about the Vikings. And we love beer as well. And this is a nut brown ale. So if you can think of anything related to those things, puns are always appreciated. Any like funny wordplay could be fun too. Throw them in the comments. Let us know what we should name this beer. We've got some time to figure that out. Obviously, we're brewing today, but then we've got to let it ferment for a few weeks, and then we've got to put it in the keg and let it sit for a couple more days after that. So
absolutely,
probably got a solid month after this episode comes out before we really have to put a name on it, right?
Yeah, basically. I mean, when you crack it open, that's basically when I feel you definitely need a name. You can't drink a beer with no name on it. So
unless the name is a beer with no name, but that's probably been done out there.
It probably has been done. I think we can get something good.
Yeah. Have you guys thought of any? Not that you have to spew it out right now. Have you thought of any? I had one idea that in the moment last week while we were recording, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And I wrote it down. And the more I've thought about it, like the more I was thinking that's a terrible, terrible name. So
well, are you going to out yourself and tell us what it was?
I don't even remember what I said.
So terrible that you don't want to call it out.
What did I say? Because I wrote it down. Did you guys see it on the outline?
See it.
I saw it. I don't know if I can pull it up quickly here.
I think it was like the Norse Brown Ale. I don't think I deleted it.
Is there a way for your audience to put like down thumbs when
I think
you
on
announce
YouTube you can thumbs down it.
Here, I'll pull up our outline quick from last week and see if you left it in there or not.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good name. So we can. I'm eliminating that name right now.
The Norse Brown Ale.
Yeah. See, in the moment, it's like, oh, that's such a cool name. But no, that's probably been done before too.
I don't know that it's the worst name.
Nah, yeah,
pick.
I was actually expecting worse.
All right. Well, maybe I'll try.
At the end of the day, though, it is a name. You want it to be good, but it's all what it tastes like. That's what you're going to remember the most.
And we kept it pretty generic last year. It was the Skol Hop Hoppy Amber.
Yep.
Was the name that we landed on for that. So, if you're out there and you want to jump in the comments and maybe add some creativity, because obviously we don't have a whole lot. I don't have anything like off the top of my head that maybe just stands out.
Maybe we can use AI.
Yeah.
See if it can spit out a few.
Put it into Chat GPT.
Guarantee. Yeah, I'd not to put the pressure on you. I'd really like you guys to, or your audience to come up with this beer, since it's kind of a Skol Hop, brew day. Yeah.
Well, this is becoming an annual tradition too. Like kind of like mid-February. We did it pretty much exactly the same time last year.
Yeah,
maybe we do March, a little warmer weather. I don't know.
We have a heater this time. I don't know if it's shown up on camera, but we got a nice big heater for the garage. Last year was pretty cold.
Yeah. That heater heated this garage up 10 degrees in less than an hour.
Yeah.
So that thing went from 40 degrees to 50 degrees, and I'm actually comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say between from last year to this year, we've got more equipment, and we'll just keep up in our game every year. So
yep. And my garage will get just a little cleaner every year.
It's pretty clean. It's clean enough for a brew.
Yeah, that's true. Which actually, you need it really clean. The equipment needs to be really clean
Absolutely.
and sanitized for a brew. So yeah, that's pretty good. Evan alluded to it, the process of this beer, and we kind of talked about it last week too, but just let's go over it again. So we boiled the water. We got the initial 4 gallons of water up to boiling or almost boiling temp.
Yep.
And in another container, the mash bin, is that essentially what it's called? Yeah,
it's called mash bin, mash tun. So basically what you do is put all your grains and then put that hot water on top of it. And then it literally just sits there for between an hour and 75 minutes. And that's when it actually becomes what they call wort. So that sweet water that has all the grain sugars and everything into it, and gives it the color of the beer and such like. So yeah, that's what we're kind of waiting on right now.
Yeah, so we're in that 75-minute period right now.
Correct.
And after that, then we will put it into the fermentation.
No. You're jumping the gun here.
See, I told you I don't know what I'm doing.
That's why we need you.
No, so after the mash tun, we're going to put it in the boil kettle.
Okay.
And that's when we'll bring it up to an actual boil and add the hops to it.
Okay.
And basically what that does is it releases the oils from the hops and gives it beer its nice bitterness flavor. Obviously, depending on what the hop is and how long you boil it, the longer you boil a hop, the more bitter it becomes. So you just have to know what style of beer you're making. For this particular beer, yes, it needs some hop profile and a little bitterness for a beer, but we're not looking for anything like an IPA type bitterness. So it all comes down to what hop you're using and how long you're going to boil it for.
Okay. And this may be a dumb question, but what a part of this process actually is fermented? What gives it the alcohol content?
It's a great question. So after the boil, we're going to bring it into the fermentation bucket, let it bring down to room temperature, say about 65, 70 degrees. And then we're going to put yeast into this thing. Okay. And that is what actually creates alcohol. The yeast eats those sugars and creates the alcohol.
The sugars from the wort. Grain.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So basically it produces, and how this will work is you put an airlock into the fermentation so air can escape. So the CO2 will escape the bucket, but does not let oxygen back in, because oxygen, when it's fermenting, will cause your beer to be infected. So basically air can come out, but no air can come in.
We're not dry hopping this.
We are not going to dry hop this. So dry hopping, that's a great question. So anytime, I mean, you can really do it on any style beer, but you most likely see it on IPAs, pale ales. You're starting to see it a little more on lagers as well. But the dry hopping really doesn't add any bitterness to a beer. It literally is just more the aroma.
Yeah.
And also will make your beer more cloudy.
Okay.
So, yep.
So we will not be doing
We won't be dry hopping on this one.
Nope. Nice. So after we do all that, we put the we bring it back up to a boil, add the hops, and then put the liquid into the fermentation chamber, bucket, whatever you want to call it. How long will it need to sit there, and what kind of environment does that bucket need to be in?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing is, because we're using an opaque bucket, so if you use something clear, you want to make sure it's something in dark. So less light is better. That's why you see a lot of beer bottles are in brown or green, just because light can affect a beer if it's sitting out in the sun too long. So that's first thing. You want it in room temperature. Every yeast strain is a little different, so you make sure you know what temperature it works best. For the yeast strain we're using, it's going to be about probably about 62 to 65 degrees.
Okay.
We're looking at uses that's the best temperature it will work its magic on. So brings up another point, maybe get into the weeds too much. We're using an ale yeast, so that goes room temperature. If you're doing a lager, it uses a lager yeast, so that's more cold, so you'll need some type of fridge or chiller. That'll work better at like those 32, 35 degrees. So
interesting. Yep. Okay. And compared to last year's Skol Hop beer, which was like an IPA, an ambery IPA, so that needed to ferment at a little bit higher temperature. Correct? Maybe
a smidge higher for that one. That yeast strain, worked better, I think, around 68 to 70 degrees. So, so like I said, you can always use, I think I have like a heating pad element that we can wrap the bucket in, or just even a blanket or whatever will help keep that temperature at a constant degree. That's mainly what you're looking for. If you put yeast into too hot of a wort, it will kill it off. If you put it at too cold of a temperature, basically the yeast kind of goes into hibernation mode. So although it's still living, it won't be doing its true activation of making beer. So you just got to find that nice sweet spot.
I asked this while we were kind of getting things set up, and we had initially put the hot water on top of the grain to make the initial mash. But when Coors Light advertises that they're cold lagered, that might be something that's maybe a little more familiar with the broader beer audience that doesn't necessarily get into the technicalities of brewing. You said that takes a lot longer too, right?
It does.
Ferment.
Typically about 3 times as long. So that's why until recently you didn't see it unless it was a massive brewer like Anheuser-Busch or Coors or Miller. You didn't see small breweries doing a lot of lagers because time is money. So doing an ale yeast takes only 2-3 weeks, and a lager takes 6 weeks. So I mean, you just have to think about, like, it goes back to the question of how long do you want to hold up one of your ton or your tanks for to make a beer. So,
and depending on the size of your brewery and the clientele of your brewery, you probably have to take into consideration who's coming, what do they like to drink. I know,
absolutely.
like a few weeks ago when we were at River Ridge Brewing for the Skol Hop live podcast, on tap live podcast with the Mainstream guys. I talked to some of the people that worked there, and they have some regulars, and those regulars that come to that brewery, they know what they want. And there are definitely more popular beers and less popular beers based on the people that regularly frequent their breweries.
Yes, it's always fun. It may not be as much, but when 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when breweries were just opening up in every neighborhood possible, it'd be hilarious because you'd sit at the bar and people would come in and they just know Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light type beer. And so basically we'll ask the bartender, what's the closest to a Bud Light? And so usually they would have a lager or a blonde ale. That was the closest thing to that. And now you're getting where people that go to breweries are more open to, not that lager or blonde ale, it's terrific. We're obviously drinking a lager right now. That's fantastic. But people had to open up their horizons to more hoppy beers, more flavorful from just what I call a non-traditional beer. So, yeah.
So one more question on beer, and then maybe we can transition to football.
Yeah.
This is like more of a rice lager, right? When is that?
Rabbit?
Yeah, the Moon Rabbit, sorry, that we're drinking from Big Grove right now. When does that rice come into play in their brewing process?
Yeah, beer? Not knowing exactly their brew process, my guess is it's right when it's in the mash tun, where they're just adding, say, 50% barley grains, wheat grains, whatever they're using, and then using rice at top of that. So it's part of the grain build itself.
Because I can definitely taste it. In this beer, it's not like overpowering. It's not like I'm at a.
So I always like, and I hate to bring
but
like a mass producer like Bud Light or whatever, but it's always easy to compare. So when you have a Bud Light versus a Busch Light, they're very similar, but you definitely can taste the difference. A Bud Light has more rice in its grain build than a Busch Light does. Busch Light is more corn based, and that's why it's cheaper to buy a Busch Light than a Bud Light, because rice is more expensive. So
sure,
it almost has like a more of a sweeter feel to it.
Yes,
it's not sugary or anything like that.
Correct.
But knowing that it's a rice style lager, you can kind of get that sweetness a little bit from it too. So not to say it again or shill out for Big Grove, but this is really good.
It's delicious.
And peeking behind the scenes into a brewing process, it's kind of cool to think like, oh yeah, I would have never thought rice to be an ingredient. But I guess if it is sugar, if there's any sugar at all, when you add yeast to it, sugar and yeast,
That's exactly
alcohol.
That's exactly what it is. It eats the sugars, creates the alcohol. And the other thing, yeast is a living organism. So basically when it eats, it almost multiplies. So it kind of creates its own, habitat. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand too. I've kind of dabbled with making mead a little bit, and we've tried it here for the first time, and I first mixed everything together last March of 2024, and yesterday and today are the first times I'm taking a sip of the final product, and that mead was essentially water, honey, and yeast. And then you put the airlock on top and you let it ferment, and it was really interesting to see the fermentation process just throughout the last year pretty much. And it's not the best mead in the world, but it's alcohol. And
I would say, anyone's first batch of anything, unless you're just lucky, it's definitely not going to be the best you ever will do if you do it again. But it's a start. You got to start somewhere, and I tried it. It's drinkable. It's more than drinkable.
Yeah.
It's good. There's things that you could definitely learn from and do better, but it's not something that I just spit out, because it's undrinkable. So
yeah, I tried it too, and it was pretty good. I didn't realize it took you almost a year to ferment that.
It doesn't necessarily take that long. Mead has, it benefits from being aged. I would say, so I did it late March of 2024. I would say it was probably ready to drink 6 to 8 weeks later. So I didn't need to wait a year. I didn't do it on purpose. It was just like I had the time, and it wasn't anything I had to pour that meat out right away.
Like you're talking wine, it usually gets better over time because it just has time to mellow and the flavors just sit there and combine a little bit better than there's certain alcohols that work better with time.
Yeah. And it's funny that we kind of talked about the temperature that fermentation takes place and the different kinds of beers that ferment, or yeast that ferments better in different temperature.
Right.
I have, my home office is in my basement, which is, just a regular basement. It gets pretty cold down there. And it's usually about 62 degrees. So again, I worked from home and I have a little space heater down there, and I would turn that space heater on. I also have a little thermometer down there, and I would notice, even as recently as a couple of months ago, if I had that space heater on and the mead was fermenting with me down in that home office, if I had that space heater on, I would see on the thermometer, if it got up to 70 degrees, I would see the yeast kind of wake up a little bit and the airlock kind of move a little bit, even a couple of months ago, after months of, being fermenting.
It sounds like the yeast was working harder than you were.
Probably some days. But yeah, it is cool to see how different environmental factors can change up beer and mead or any alcohol process.
Absolutely.
Like that.
And like I said, if there's any sugar, yeast will find it. It's when there literally is no more sugar to be had that yeast will just, kind of die off because there's nothing else to eat. It's kind of just like the human process. You got to have something to eat. So
yeah. Or drink.
Drink.
Well, we've definitely leaned into more of the hop side of the Skol Hop for this first part of this episode.
Absolutely.
I've learned a lot, and I learned a lot last year, and I feel like I forgot most of it, and now I'm like relearning everything as we kind of re-engage with the process. But it's really interesting, and it's fascinating. Like, I'm assuming a lot of our viewers out there like beer and enjoy a good beer, and so it's fascinating to just kind of start to dig into more of the intricacies behind how beer is made.
Yeah, in theory, beer or alcohol in general is so easy to make in concept.
Simple. The process can be simple.
This process can be simple, but you have to
say easy.
Yeah, easy can be an understatement. You're right. Those are good.
But all that to say, I would say if a listener or anyone is interested in making their own alcohol, whether it's a batch of beer or mead, there's tons of tutorials out there. Maybe Forrest, you should start a YouTube channel.
I don't know about that. I think there's plenty out there. The people that are, that's how I learned. So I think it's covered. But I would say, just to advocate, if you're interested with specifically with beer, and I think they do in wine and mead now, just grab a kit because they have it so much where they have everything measured out and the instructions are so well put together. It may not be the best thing you've ever drank, but it will be quality. If you follow the instructions, it'll be quality for sure.
Yeah, it's easier and easier to get into, at least trying it out. So like you said, it's not going to be your favorite beer you've ever had, but it'll be a beer that you've made and you can take some pride in that. And yeah, it's easier and easier. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to get the equipment. It's fun. You can enjoy it yourself.
Yep. Agreed.
Well, let's maybe transition a little bit, because one of our favorite things to do is drink beer while we talk football.
Yeah.
And that's typically what we spend most of our time doing. But it's fun.
I'm going to check the beer real quick, but you keep going on.
Yeah, right. You check the beer, and we'll kind of move us towards some football topics here. Yeah, we'll lean into the Skol part here as we go. We're getting the thumbs up from Forrest over there as he's checking things. So we're just moving right along here. This is so far a successful brew day.
I do remember last year there was a point and I know as you're saying we should transition to football, but one more thing about beer. Last year there was a point where we were pretty much finished with the Skol Hop beer, and we were checking gravity. And Forrest, I think it was the actual, what's the it's not a thermometer. What's the...
oh man, you're gonna put me on the spot. It's a hydrometer, so it measures the gravity of the beer. So basically, you put it in after the mash, and you get what they call the starting gravity. And then after it goes through fermentation and all that, the number should be much lower because obviously it's been the sugar's been ate by all the from the yeast, so it should measure in much lower, and that's how you calculate your alcohol content. So,
but all that to say, we took that first measurement with the hydrometer, and you cheered as if you just saw JJ McCarthy throw the game-winning touchdown pass in the national championship. We saw that number. It was exactly what you hoped you would see. I'm thinking you didn't think we would see that number, but you saw that measurement and you're like, yes. Like, I think we high-fived. Like, you were super pumped. And I was excited just because you were, and that meant that it was a good thing. And I didn't really know what it was.
Yeah, it's always comes down to if you hit your numbers, you feel much better that the beer's going to be just a real quality beer. I always go with the idea that, we try to make 5 gallons, but if I have to cut it off at 4.5 to get a better quality, I go that versus quantity. So,
and you also did a mini version of that cheer over there a minute ago when you checked on the beer.
Well, that's good news because we're definitely on the right track for a really solid beer here in about a month, hopefully.
Oh yeah.
So that's exciting. Well, there's no more football for a while.
Dude, you're forgetting about the Battlehawks, okay?
All right. Maybe this year is the year that I finally become a Battlehawks. I wouldn't say fan. I'm going to put fan. I'm going to put fan in quotation marks.
You're going to be a fan
because
man.
I'm a lifelong fan of the Vikings. You wouldn't be a Vikings fan if it weren't for me.
Sometimes I wish you moved here from Boston.
From Boston, yeah. We've talked about that.
Or Kansas City at this point.
Well, no.
Well, I know this is not the avenue you want to talk about, but the Lions, their kicker came from the UFL.
Yeah.
Bates. So I'm just saying, you don't see a ton. You don't see a ton of it, but there are players that it's a springboard to the NFL or back to the NFL. So
well, when Will Reichard got hurt, John Parker Romo filled in, and that's
a great.
He's another UFL, and there were times after Reichard came back where we were like, "Oh, come back, Parker Romo," because Reichard just wasn't the same after he came back from his little IR stint.
Yeah, I think Reichard will be good.
I think he'll recover well in this next season. But
and I have nothing to base that on. I'm just hopeful.
Yeah.
Also, UFL players to the NFL. Jalen Redmond. I think I might be wrong on this. I think he played for the Houston Roughnecks in the UFL and signed as a free agent for the Vikings this year. I probably should know this. I don't know if he's a free agent again or if he had like a 2-year deal. But yeah, he flashed defensive tackle for the Vikings. I hope they sign him again if he's not. If not, I hope they sign him to a longer contract because he flashed, and I think he even started a couple of games towards the end.
Yeah, he was definitely hot there for a minute for the Vikings, so I'm hopeful that he'll come back. Well, let's maybe spend some time talking about, maybe we can circle back to what we talked about last year, because I felt like we had some interesting takes that ended up kind of transpiring in real life, because we did this exact same thing. We had a brew day. It was mid-February 2024. It was before the 2024 draft. We talked about some stuff that, like I said, kind of actually happened. So maybe we could circle back to that and just kind of recap some of those things.
For sure.
You brought up something earlier that Forrest had predicted. Or had mentioned. It was a hot take of Forrest.
Yeah. So what episode number was that?
I think it was 28.
28. So around 28, if it's not 28, it's the last brew day episode that we had.
I'm confident it's 28 because I went back and listened to it this morning before
the Adrian Peterson episode. Okay.
Yeah. So go back to episode 28 if you want to hear what we talked about last year.
Yep. Forrest, real quick, do you remember what your hot take was?
I do. So I don't want to. I'm not one to say I told you so.
No, it's good.
But I believe I said something around the story of Bo Nix.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a mic drop towards the end. Like, if you cut the episode off before it was done, you'd miss it. But you said something like, oh yeah, hot take, I think Bo Nix might end up being the best quarterback in the draft class.
Yeah, and I might have used the word best, but I had a feeling he was going to be better than all the others, the Drake Mays, the Caleb Williams, at least early on. Mm-hmm. You looked at how many quarterbacks were taken before Bo Nix. Michael Penix was taken before him.
So it was Caleb Williams, Drake May,
Jaden
Daniels, Michael Penix, obviously JJ McCarthy.
Yep, and JJ. Yep.
And I think that was it.
And obviously we can't compare because JJ was out this year, but I think we honestly can say Bo Nix definitely lived up to the expectations that Broncos fans were hoping for when they drafted him.
Yeah, they made the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah, they did make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, because they played the Chiefs in the last game of the regular season, and the Chiefs rested all their starters, and the Broncos blew them out like 38-7 or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and
because they were resting their starters.
And I would say, obviously, I felt Bo Nix had a good, was just a good quarterback, playing in multiple good systems. But I think he fit well with Sean Payton and his style of offense. So I think it goes a long way to say, the quarterback can be even better if they get matched up with a good head coach, quarterback coach, OC. So
sounds like you're describing JJ McCarthy.
I'm kind of describing Caleb Williams of the Bears as well.
You're hopeful. You're just, I don't know. I hope it crashes and burns.
I think that's the sentiment in the NFL, though. Like, I think anymore, you have to have the right combination of quarterback and coach. And it might not be head coach, because you might have a defensive-minded head coach, or you might have a head coach like Dan Campbell who doesn't specialize in anything and just
bites kneecaps and sounds like an idiot and
we
benefits
throw a little
from his coordinators.
We'll throw a little shade at the Lions because we're a little salty,
and they have the worst fan. Maybe the
worst fan base.
Maybe it's 1A and 1B with Philly.
All right. Well, that's your opinion. I don't know that I subscribe to that.
The Skol Hop's official opinion. I'm done.
Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is I think anymore in the NFL, the quarterback has to be somewhat aligned with the coaching staff. There has to be that. What word am I looking for?
I think you're going to say symbiotic, but
no,
that good relationship.
There's got to be some.
I feel like it's like
harmony
a Karate Kid, like the grasshopper versus the mentor.
For sure. Well, as Vikings fans, we've definitely seen it with Kevin O'Connell. So actually, I made some really bad takes on this episode last year. I talked about how Kevin O'Connell, we saw how this doesn't work when we bring in some other quarterbacks, and it's great for 2 minutes and then it's terrible for but we had such a small sample size at that point. I mean, we'd really only ever known Kevin O'Connell as the head coach with Kirk Cousins. Then Kirk went down with his Achilles tear, and they tried to patch things over with the Pastronaut, which
was really fun for about 60 minutes of football.
For really 4 quarters, the last 2 of one game and the next 2 of another game. But then there's Nick Mullins, and they tried Jaron Hall, and none of those just seemed to fit. But then Sam Darnold comes on the scene this year, and it was you referenced the Karate Kid. It was almost like Kevin O'Connell is the sensei. He just was able to whisper sweet nothings into Sam Darnold's ear, and Darnold went out and performed at a really high level until it mattered the most, and then he kind of crumbled under the pressure. But
even with that crumbling, Darnold, through the tutelage of Kevin O'Connell, and we forget to say it all the time, Darnold also spent a full season with Shanahan, and that pretty talented 49ers team.
He was coming in with some prerequisite knowledge that really set him up to be successful with the Vikings,
and
for sure.
Yeah, Darnold definitely earned himself a lot of money in the future,
yes.
Which as of yet is not determined. We don't even know if the Vikings are ultimately going to re-sign him. I don't think they will, but that's a whole nother topic that'll derail all of our time for the next hour if we let it.
Can I derail it for just a second?
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of what we do. We start out on a topic and then we,
It's what makes this podcast so good. It's just you can just take any topic and talk about it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we get to control what we talk about too, which
That's
is
true.
the beauty of a podcast. Anyways, I saw a video this morning of, I'm pretty sure they were players and coaches at there's kind of that media day right before the Super Bowl. There's like the big convention center kind of thing, and all the different media outlets have a booth, and players and coaches and whatever, they kind of just make the rounds, and these guys from the different networks will interview them and ask them questions. And there was one, I don't even remember the network he was from off the top of my head, but he just asked everybody that came by his booth. Side note, if you're hearing some extraneous noise here, we're just firing up the kettle again, getting some stuff heated up here for the next round of the brew process. So that's why Forrest is stepping back into the camera. Anyways, this interviewer asked everybody that stopped by the booth, where does Sam Darnold end up next year? And 9 out of 10 people that stopped at that booth said he's back with the Vikings. I don't know why he would go anywhere else. It's just logical. He'll be back with the Vikings. And that just was the resounding repeated answer that everybody gave. And it was kind of interesting to me because these people are in it. Like they are the insiders on this. They work, live, breathe, sleep, eat football like 24/7. They are in the league. They play or coach in the league, and they have a front row seat to all of this. And they're saying he's going to be back with the Vikings.
That would be interesting. I wouldn't necessarily hate it. It's not what I would want. And I know we said we wouldn't talk about this, or I said we shouldn't talk about this, but here we go. I would advocate just to go with JJ. I think if the Vikings were sitting here and they didn't draft JJ McCarthy last year and they went, 2 defensive guys or something like that, they didn't have a plan, and then everything else still played out the same way with Darnold flourishing, then I would be saying like, holy cow, absolutely get Darnold, because there's the quarterback draft class in this upcoming class. Like, Forrest, you can probably speak to it. There's not too many guys. Even the best guys aren't. I'd
say the best guys on the board, and things will play out, but from my view, the best guys on the board this year probably are bring back Bo Nix. Not as good as what he was, and he was one of the last in the first round.
I feel like Bo Nix,
other 4. So
Bo Nix would be the first overall pick this year.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
JJ McCarthy would be the first overall pick.
I'm not as fond of the draft, the quarterback draft class this year as I was last year. And I think teams in general feel that same way. So to your point, you may see teams spending a little bit more on, say, a Sam Darnold because they know what they're a known commodity.
Yeah. So all that to say, if the Vikings didn't have JJ McCarthy, who at this moment in time seems like he's healing well. We hear about him getting on the practice field already, working out. He looks a little skinny, but he's got a whole off season to figure all that out. If that wasn't the Vikings option, then I'd say, oh my gosh, you have to keep Darnold. You have to franchise him. You have to sign him for a 3, 4, 5 year deal. That's not the case, though. And some other team, and we talked about this in episode 79 last week, some other team will pay, and good for them and good for Sam, they will pay Sam more than the Vikings will be willing to. And that's okay. Sam will be fine financially. And one more thought on this. I think my prediction is this will have been, 24 will have been the best year of Sam Darnold's career, because he probably needs KOC as much as the Vikings would need a good quarterback.
I'll let Evans, but I would could definitely see that. The Vikings offense is loaded with talent. I mean, for receivers and tight end to throw to.
Except for the offensive line, maybe.
The line, yeah, but it reminds me very much, I hate to say it, but the Bears, where they now have a lot of offensive weapons, but can they get an O-line to protect that QB? So, yeah, I could definitely see your point about Sam Darnold maybe this year with the offensive weapons he had, and depending on what team he goes with next, he may not be as good.
So let me ask this question for either of you. If you're the Bears and you could redraft the 2024 draft and you have the first overall pick, what do you do? Do you stick with Caleb Williams and see what happens?
Personally, I still love the pick of Caleb Williams, and I believe you can, how right I was with Bo Nix. I was not a big fan. I knew Caleb Williams was talented. I just did not like his attitude in college. It seems like he's toned it down, at least in year one, where it felt like he was receptive to his veteran receivers and other players around him. So I'm hoping, especially going forward with Ben Johnson, that he can give him a lot of more tools in the toolbox.
He definitely seemed to embrace the professionalism that it takes to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I will give him that. But I think he was kind of set up to fail too.
Yeah.
I mean, he had.
Yep.
You have this GM who makes this outlandish claim that we're going to take the North and never give it back, and you got this coach that's just not good.
He was.
And that's probably
he was
an
a way.
understatement.
He's not. He may be a decent defense coordinator, but he's not head coach material.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not ready for that type of role.
It's a totally different job. I mean, again, not to derail, but you could be an amazing coordinator, a Ben Johnson, and we'll see how he turns out as a head coach. But to transition from a really good, if you look at it from like a company, to go from a really good manager to a CEO, because that's what a head coach is. They're a CEO of the football team. That's a totally different job. That's why I think Kevin O'Connell is so successful, because he's not quite let go of all of those coordinator duties. He still calls plays, but he's also proving that he's a good leader of men and a good CEO.
I agree with that
so far.
And I think Ben Johnson's going to take the same philosophy where he's going to be the play caller, at least for year one,
which is good. As Bears fans, you should be excited about that.
Exactly. So I'm hoping it follows kind of your guys' model of KOC came in from the OC position, but he knows how to delegate responsibility enough.
Is for the Bears specifically, is all of the extraneous stuff maybe distracting from the product on the field, because you have a lot of drama surrounding like the stadium, for example. Like, do we stay at Soldier Field? Do we build out in Arlington Heights? Where is this, and how does that affect the city of Chicago financially and all this? Do we keep the product here right on the coast of Lake Michigan, or do we move it out to the suburbs? And then you have the matriarch of the franchise that just passed away like last week.
That's true.
That's another kind of big deal, I think, for this franchise. Like, as a Bears fan, I don't know how that affects the Bears.
For me, I mean, honestly, I would hope they would stay on in that heart of Chicago. Yeah. I mean, the stadium needs updates, but it's beautiful being right on Lake Michigan.
We were there
Lakeshore
just a few years ago.
I really enjoyed Soldier Field.
But is it a distraction to players? I don't know. I can't speak. I don't think it should be, because they're gonna feel a team regardless. I think they just need to be more concentrated on the actual production on the field. But your other point, I think that does change some things with the change. Yeah, she wasn't as probably entwined into the decision making, but ownership still has a factor into that. So I could definitely see some change of philosophy potentially.
For those that don't know, and I don't know either, what was her name again? McCaskey was her last name.
Yes.
But she's the daughter
Virginia McCaskey.
Yes.
Was she the daughter or the granddaughter of George Hallis?
I believe the daughter.
Yes, I believe it's the daughter of, yes. And now her son, technically, he was the major technically owner of it and whatever they call it, president or
Sure.
of the team. So
And I know Bears fans that, especially towards the end of this previous season, the 24 season, we're not the biggest fans of the McCaskies. I heard a lot of sell the team and get rid of them, but Virginia, that's her name, right?
it is Virginia.
Yep.
She was a very historic piece of the NFL. She kind of witnessed it from birth, pretty much.
She died, 103 or something?
Yeah. What a good run. And I mean, the Bears they're one of the historic franchises in the league.
They are.
We're Vikings fans. We'll talk crap about the Bears, but like, honestly, the Bears they've got a cool history. They've won a Super Bowl, and then how many championships before the Super Bowl came around. It is a loss to the NFL, her passing away.
It is. You hardly ever see ownership stick around that long.
Yeah, I think of like the McCaskies. Well, the Hallises. She was a Hallis,
yes,
married.
but
and
married.
Then
yes,
the Maras in New York for the Giants. The Rooneys
the
for
Raiders,
the Steelers
for the Davis.
Oh yeah, Davis. Yeah, it was Al, and now it's
I can't remember.
It's only been a decade.
But yes, you just don't see it as much. People, especially see billions of dollars to buy a franchise anymore. It's
especially when it first started, and it was just people in their garage, like, we should throw
ridiculous.
some guys out on a field to start a franchise. It was like $100, which in 1920 was a significant amount of money.
It's crazy.
But I feel like the NFL is still relatively immune to these like conglomerates of owners coming in. Like you see this a lot in the NBA and a little bit now in the MLB, where multiple wealthy guys are coming together and saying, okay, we're going to buy, a portion of this team. And that really doesn't happen in the NFL.
Well, it was kind of by rule. You couldn't sell you couldn't have less than a certain percentage as an owner. But I think in recent years, in the last 5 or so years, that's kind of changed. And owners kind of approved selling off small shares. That's why you see Tom Brady coming in as an extremely minority owner of the Raiders. I don't know what percentage it is, but it's like 1 or 2. It's still a significant amount of money to buy 1% of an NFL team. But I think there was a specific rule that didn't allow for minority owners like that they've kind of pulled back a little bit. So we might start seeing
for sure. And I said it's not like it's not present at all in the NFL, and I think we'll see more and more of that. But up to this point in 2025, we really haven't seen a lot of that. And Tom Brady is such a unique case because he's arguably one of the most successful players in league history. He also has a broadcasting contract, and there's just a lot of conflicts of interest there. Like,
hot take about if we're doing hot takes on Brew Day episodes, I think we've seen the one and only season of Tom Brady announcing games.
Really?
It could be. I won't disagree with you either. I think he tried it and he realized it may not be his thing.
He called the Super Bowl.
He did, which is weird. I mean, it's not nepotism because there wasn't family involved, but talk about favoritism. I don't think he deserved. He didn't do terrible in the Super Bowl, but there's other guys. I like Olsen. What's his first name? Greg Olsen. I like him a lot.
Greg Olsen's good.
There's very highly qualified
I don't
announcers.
mind Tony Romo.
Tony Romo is actually one of the better ones
because he kind of predicts the play before it happens.
He was actually one of my favorites to get a new voice in there. I really enjoyed his commentary.
Jim Nance and Tony Romo, they're a great combo.
They might be one of the best.
Jim, you got to watch this here. The tight end's going to motion to the left. And
I will say I'm not huge on Troy Aikman. He does an okay job, but
he's kind of nostalgic at this point.
Yeah,
as long as I've been watching football, he's been a voice.
But back to your point, I could definitely see Tom Brady focusing more on his ownership stuff with the Raiders and
I've never hated on Tom Brady being an announcer. I thought he got a lot better as the year went on. Not that I don't think it'll be his only year because he'll get fired for it or something. I think networks they would enjoy him as an announcer. I just think, to your point, he might just be like, I did it. I wasn't elite. I'm good. Like, I'm going to go do
he's
other
gotta
ventures.
find something more in his niche.
Yeah.
I think he tried it, and he can move on and be okay with that. So
I'll make another hot take really quick, unrelated to Tom Brady, but related to calling games. I think we might see Kirk Cousins in the booth before too long.
He's a good voice.
I don't know that I think he's got maybe a year or two left of football in him, so I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe. This is all very hypothetical, but when he got benched by the Falcons this year for Michael Penix, he made an appearance. I don't know if it was on ESPN or Fox. I can't remember which network it was, but he made kind of a pregame appearance at, the round desk where they're on the sideline and they're doing the pregame show and whatever. And he had some really good takes and seemed to be very articulate. And that's not something that I would have expected Kirk Cousins to be good at. I always thought he would transition very seamlessly from playing to coaching. I thought even when he was hurt with his Achilles, I thought for sure we'd see him on the sideline a lot quicker than we did with the Vikings, coaching up, whoever was. I mean, we had 3 different quarterbacks after.
My goodness.
After
Sometimes
he went down.
3 in one game.
yeah,
Right. So, anyways,
Interesting.
I made those takes on the Skol Hop way back then. I thought, oh yeah, Kirk Cousins is going to be on the sideline.
I love
with
the
an
hot
earpiece.
takes. I love them.
But I really think Kirk Cousins could have a career in broadcasting, and I think he's got obviously the on-field perspective of it all. I don't know that he's going to be as prolific as like a Tony Romo, who's able to like predict the play right before it happens. But no, I think we might see Kirk Cousins in the booth before too long.
Yeah, and not to crap on Tony Romo or any announcer that amazes us by predicting the play. I think that's just being a good film watcher.
Yeah.
And because Romo probably watches film in a very similar way as a broadcaster that he did as a player, and these players, they study the other team, they know tendencies. So when Romo says something right before they snap the ball, like, oh, you see that linebacker, he's coming up, but then he's going to go out, and then this quarterback, if he sees that, he can throw an out route.
Yep.
Like they seem to predict the play, and they're really good at it. But that's also just a product of watching film, which, to your point, Kirk Cousins, love him or hate him, as a quarterback, he was never awful, which means he's a good film watcher.
He was well studied,
and
for sure.
could probably be in that Romo-esque area of announcing. I think that's a good take.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it before, but I think there's some merit to that.
Yeah, we'll see. Only time will tell. A hot take is a hot take for a hot minute, and then eventually it's either really, really cold or really, really good. So,
How are we looking on time?
This says just under 8 minutes left.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Kirk Cousins do that, but I also wouldn't be shocked to see him just never be heard from again.
Just completely disappear from the NFL.
I got my family, I got my lake house, I got my money, I got everything. And maybe he takes a break, and then 10 years from now.
Certainly got no shortage of cash.
No,
He's got a lot
good
of
for
money.
him. Good for him.
Yep.
I don't hate on him at all for that, because if I could sign a $100 million guaranteed contract.
It really is interesting, though. Like you said, a lot of these guys, they'll either go into coaching or they'll do more of a broadcast type feel. And I appreciate that, because you just got to feel your way of what you're going to do next after your career. Obviously, money's not the huge obstacle typically. You've made your fortune, but they're, probably less than 40 years old at most times. What do you want to do with your life?
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch people. I watch it with football and watch it with college basketball. These people that start doing the commentary, whether it be actually at the game or just on a highlight show, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah. If there's a retired NFL player out there, a professional athlete, that you're less than 40, you got a bunch of money, and you don't know what to do with your life, invest in Forrest and open up a brewery.
Hey, there you go.
I'll do you right.
I have a name. You can open up the Miller Brewing Company.
Man, you're gonna have to scrap that right now. We're gonna get sued. although now I think Molson Coors that bought Miller, so we might be safe.
You could probably just
I don't know.
Well, you sue them for it's your name. It's your name, Forrest Miller. It's the Miller Brewing Company.
Right.
Maybe just like spell it differently with 3 L's or something. I don't know.
Very creative there, and that's why we will not have Austin name our beer this time.
I've got one more question for us, and then I think we should wrap this up because we've got more work to do brewing this beer that we're making here. 1 year from now, I mean, we've done this 2 years in a row now, so we're gonna do this again.
It's a habit now.
February-ish of 2026.
Yes.
So last year we talked a lot about JJ McCarthy, and he was, all right, early second round, late first round pick, and then he kind of shot up the charts, and the Vikings took him in the first round. Obviously, we know how that story ends. He got hurt in his first preseason game, sat out the entire season. But there's still a lot of optimism around JJ McCarthy as the Vikings quarterback. Whether or not he's going to be the starter or not remains to be seen. But he's a former Michigan Wolverine, national championship winning Michigan Wolverine.
That's right.
A year from now, what are we going to be saying about JJ McCarthy? Make a hot take, since we're kind of in this groove of making hot takes.
If I'll go first, I know JJ, if he's healthy, he has the weapons with your wide receivers and tight ends
and coach.
And coach. Your O-line is going to be fine. You're going to find what needs to be done. I think he gets you at least playoff bound again. I just believe JJ enough. He's just a winner at heart. He has a good attitude, and he's willing to put in the work. So
you think JJ's the starter, and he helps the Vikings get into the playoffs in 2026?
I do.
Okay. Austin?
Barring injury, which can derail anything. Day one starter, uncontested. Even if they have some fake battle in training camp or semblance of a battle in training camp, he'll win it immediately over Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones or quarterback du jour. JJ McCarthy, day one starter, and 3,000 plus yards, 500 plus rushing yards, 25 touchdowns.
Total touchdowns or just passing touchdowns?
Passing. And then
the dude can run, though. I mean,
he can run. We know that.
He has the wheels to do it. So
I don't know. You can never predict wins because sometimes the ball just doesn't bounce your way. Playoffs, definitely.
Yes.
And because of him and Kevin O'Connell. If the coach was Matt Eberflus or, Josh McDaniels or something, I'd say, it doesn't. You could have Tom Brady back there and it wouldn't matter. Kevin O'Connell, I more believe in Kevin O'Connell than anything else. I think he will.
I agree. I don't think you guys take a step back from moving from Sam Darnold to JJ. And in fact, you stay at same par or maybe even get a little bit better. So
potentially. What do you think?
I'm going to disagree with you guys.
All right,
a
let's
little bit. Mostly just for the sake of argument and just to keep things interesting and not just to be a yes man to everything you've said, because I hope for all of that. That would be awesome.
I actually don't hope for that, being a Bears fan, but I'm trying to be realistic.
All right, that's fair. But I've been a Vikings fan longer than you have.
Barely.
Since birth. So
okay.
But I've learned how to manage my expectations with this team. This past season, the 2024 season, surpassed everybody's expectations. I mean, we didn't expect the Vikings to win 10 games, and they had won 10 games
in October.
It was crazy. It was nuts. I think a quarterback change will happen. I think JJ will be, as you've said, the day one starter. I don't think it's a 13, 14, 15 win season like it was this year. I think we're looking at 9 to 10 wins. I think they're on the plus side of the margin of victory. I think they come out above 500, but I don't know that it's more than 10 wins. And I think the losses are bad. I think they're ugly losses, and I think those losses kind of mar the season in a pretty negative way. We've seen how competitive the NFC North is.
Oh yeah.
I don't expect that to change a whole lot.
The Lions won't be as good.
The Lions won't be as good, but I still think they'll be decent, even with those two coordinators leaving the Lions. I think the Bears are on the up and up with Ben Johnson coming in. He proved with the Lions how effective of a coordinator he can be, and we all know it wasn't Dan Campbell. The only thing Dan Campbell did was say, let's go for it on fourth down.
We're going to find out a little bit more. I think Dan Campbell's a great coach, and maybe that's what the Lions need as a head coach, and let the coordinators do the nitty gritty. But I agree. It will not be the same Lions team.
But I think the Bears are elevated with his presence, with Caleb Williams. I think if they can find that synergy that you need, but like I mentioned earlier, between coach and quarterback, if they can find that, the Bears will be a force to be reckoned with. The Packers were, other than losing all their NFC North games, they won everything else. Or I guess they won one over the Bears, right? On that last second field goal.
Lost to the Bears too, and then late in the season.
They only won one NFC North game, though. It was that last second field goal against the Bears. So they lost 5 out of 6 in the North.
I forgot the Bears. That was a blocked field goal. Otherwise, oh man.
But anyways,
that timer just went off. By the way,
we need to. We definitely need to wrap this up. That's my hot take. I think
I like it.
I think the Vikings won't be as dominant as they were. I think their schedule is a little more challenging. I think JJ will have some growing pains.
And I don't want to speak for Austin, but when I preface that they're going to be a better team, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the same record or a better record.
Yeah.
Because you guys had an astounding record. I just think overall you're going to be better primed when you're in the playoffs to actually have a chance to win the game.
Yeah.
That's
why I said I won't predict wins because that's unpredictable. But.
And I'm not ready to predict wins yet either. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the draft, with free agency. We've got a lot of offseason. Dustin Baker said it a few weeks ago on our episode. This is actually some of the most exciting news for Vikings fans and Vikings content creators like ourselves to really talk about, because now we get to talk about all the hypotheticals of, all right, we brought in this guy and we drafted this guy and what are we going to do, So I'm a little more managed in my expectations with this next year. I don't know that we're 14 wins like we were this year, but I'm excited for JJ McCarthy. I think this is his team. I think the Vikings will move on from Darnold. Maybe they keep Daniel Jones. Who knows? The quarterback situation seems to be this ongoing saga with the Vikings.
Yeah.
How do they handle that? Who do they keep? Who do they let go?
At least this year it's about the backup.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty confident JJ is the guy. It's his team now.
Yep.
And I think everybody truly, if they were honest, believes that as well.
Beer, what'd you guys think?
Love it.
Fantastic.
I liked it too. I had two of them.
It's so simple of a beer, but so flavorful. Well done, Big Grove.
Yeah, I've always kind of looked down on beers that are less than 5%. Just like, okay, like I my sweet spot's like the 6%ers. Like if you're a good beer and you're like 6%, like awesome. So my initial thought was like, 4.8, like okay, sure, like I'm sure it'll be fine. No, this was phenomenal. This is really good. Big Grove didn't pay us to say anything about this. You purchased this yourself.
Absolutely.
I would absolutely gladly have this again.
Yes, this is easily one that I could go to again. So.
Even over the other quote unquote cheap beers, the Coors Light, the Busch Light, and I don't know what this costs. It probably is a little bit
more, but honestly, I always go quality is the top priority. Yeah, you don't want to spend the bank on it, but this wasn't anything like you're going to lose, ton of money on, but good, so good.
This is a beer that will bring in the guy that only drinks Bud Light.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's better than that.
Absolutely.
Ditto to everything you guys have said. Big Grove, Moon Rabbit. If you haven't tried it and you can get your hands on some, we would definitely recommend it. It's a really good beer. Easy drinking, not the highest alcohol percentage, so you can have a few and not really be affected too much. Would recommend. Let's wrap this up here. If people want to find the Skol Hop, where can they find us?
We're everywhere. We have a website that I will be updating this week. It hasn't been updated in this year, but it's got everything there. theskolhop.com. Reach out to us via email at theskolhop@gmail.com. We're on all the socials, Twitter or X if you can't call it Twitter anymore.
It's Twitter.
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the places we're there. Sorry, Forrest, we are not yet on Threads as far as I know.
What about MySpace?
Yeah, you brought that up last time. I'm working on it.
Okay.
I need to call Tom. Is that?
Were you even alive during MySpace?
I had my top 5 friends.
We need to get a dial-up connection first, then we can get on MySpace.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, we're everywhere. If you want to find us, you can. Specifically YouTube. That's probably that's where all of our content goes. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to see us, you can. If you just want to listen to us, you can. We're everywhere. Did I forget anything?
No, I think we're good. And make sure you tune in next week to episode 81 because we're going to recap the brewing process. We'll have Forrest on again.
Man, you're going to get tired of me on this podcast.
I don't think we will. You might get tired of us, but we won't get tired of you.
I love it. Like I said before, now a Vikings fan, love the podcast, love hanging out with you guys.
We definitely enjoy having you on. We'll recap the brew process, talk about how all of it went. We'll update everybody out there on like what the final gravity reading was before we put it not to sleep, but kind of to ferment for a couple weeks, so to speak.
Exact opposite of to sleep.
Yeah, exact opposite of to sleep. But we'll give you guys an update on all of that next week, and who knows, maybe we'll have some Vikings and or Bears news to talk about even next week on episode 81. So make sure you check that out. If you want to see the previous episode 79, we had Forrest on last week where we sampled some of the grain that we're actually brewing with today, and talked a little bit about last year's beer, what we're doing differently with this year's beer. So make sure you check that out as well. And I think that's it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Until next time.
Skol.
Skol.
Yeah.
Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures. Step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop.